Okay, so we are live. Namaste Sangam Talk viewers. Today's episode of the Luminaries of Bengal series is titled as Vivekanand's Bharat, a phoenix that rose from the ashes. This is the fourth episode in 11 episode series on Luminaries of Bengal. This episode will be all about Swami Vivekanand and his transformative journey. We will learn today about his early life in Kolkata, his extensive readings of Western philosophy and Indian scriptures, his writings, as well as his association with Sri Ramakrishna Paramhans. Our speakers today is Joydeep Maharaj and Professor Debashish Chatterjee, Director IIM Kodikoze. Namaste, sir. Welcome to the Sangam Talks. Namaste, Professor
Namaste.
Debashish, sir. And Namaste, Kanchan, sir. Kanchan, sir, will be our moderator for today's talk. I would like to take this wonderful opportunity first to introduce our speakers and our moderator. Firstly, Professor Debashish Chatterjee. He has taught leadership class at Harvard University and at the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, Lucknow, and Kozhikode. For more than 2 decades, he has been awarded the prestigious Fulbright Fellowship twice for pre-doctoral research and postdoctoral work at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. His published works include 18 books, including Karma Sutras, Leading Consciously, and Timeless Leadership, that have been translated into several international languages. Recently, he published his novel, Krishna, The Seventh Sense. He has trained more than 25,000 managers globally in Fortune 100 corporations and over 20,000 school principals and teachers. His recent book, Invincible Arjuna, has emerged as a path breaking book in recent times. He has served as leadership coach to political leaders and CEOs of major Indian organizations. He has served as a dean of SP Jain School of Global Management in Singapore, a pioneer in the field of Asian models in leadership. Professor Chatterjee served as director of Indian Institute of Management IM Kozhikode from 2009 to 2014. Dean and tenured professor at IIM Lucknow, Professor Chatterjee is credited with transforming IIM Kozhikode from an obscure regional school to an institution of national impact and global recognition. He has also served as the Director General of IMI Delhi, India's first corporate sponsored business school, and as independent director on the boards of several multinational and Indian companies. Professor Debashish Chatterjee was the mentor director of IIM Amritsar from June 2018 to July 2019. He has been reappointed as the director of IIM Kozhikode for a second 5 years term from June 2018. Welcome again, Professor Debashish. Next, our other speaker is Joydeep Maharaj. Joydeep Maharaj is born in Lübeck, Germany in 1962, and he grew up in Kolkata with a passion for literature and theatre. He studied literature in English from Jadavpur University. He wrote and directed many significant plays, which were staged and performed in various parts of Bengal, and his writings got published in numerous Bengali and English magazines. Swami Paramananda became his mentor and guru. He was reborn into a wholly new perspective and he gave up his job and joined Paramananda mission. He wrote extensively in Chairai Bhati magazine, both in Bengali and English. He translated Swami Paramananda's work in English and also wrote a drama called Shishuraj. Then he wrote a book named Kala Darshata. His words and teachings inspired the young generation a lot. Later, in 2011, he established a spiritual retreat, Maramia, in Azimganj, Murshidabad, where he presently works and lives. He travels and talks, inspire and guide people from all walks of life to a spiritual vision and freedom. Many people from Europe and various parts of our country come to Maramia to experience the art of life and living. Welcome again, Joydeep Maharaj. Our moderator for today is Shri Kanchan Banerjee ji. Kanchan Banerjee ji is a thinker, researcher, author, social leader, the founder and managing director of a research institute called Boston Center for Excellence for Health and Human Development. Kanchanji was born in a small village of West Bengal, India, where he had the first hand experience of the communist movements, including the rise of the left front and Naxalism. Later, he moved to the US to study computer science. As it happens with anybody living far from his or her native place, he also felt a deeper connection to the roots. From far, Kanchanji could see India in a different light. The India of the past, invaded, colonized, yet survived along with its cultural history and heritage. He started questioning many facts about India learned from textbooks in India and the West, media and literature. That's when he began researching and studying Indian history in world context to determine why Indians are so naive about their past and completely ignorant about their future. And also, he was determined to find a way out for India in future. His latest book, The Crash of Civilization, was published in July 2022. Welcome again, Kanchan sir. With this, I will hand over the baton to Kanchanji to moderate this talk. Kanchanji, please take over.
Namaskar. Thank you, Akshay ji, for the introductions. As you know, this is a collaboration between the Sangam Talks and Bangla Abar, which is an organization we started in Calcutta, in New York, as an NGO to promote the heritage and history and culture of Bengal. And as you know, literally, Bangla Abar means Bengal again. So Bengal finds its glory back someday soon. That's our mission, and integrate with the rest of Bharat. This in this series, as you have noted already, we started with Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Then we spoke about Brahmo Samaj and Rishi Bankim Chandra. And today's talk is about Swami Vivekananda. We know that most of us, when we take the name Swami Vivekananda, it evokes an emotion uh, in people, doesn't matter how old they are. But do we really know that Swamiji, that who existed, who came, the way the new generation, do they appreciate uh, that there was a person born as Swami Vivekananda? What did he do? So we always take it for granted that we know a lot, but if there's no relevance of that person's life today, it's only about doing puja. Garland the person on the day of birth or anniversary, and forget next day. So this talk is very serious, and we have two very, very distinguished speakers. They have done a lot of work in knowing the spiritual traditions of Bharat, where Swami Vivekananda has a place in recent times nobody has. So with that introduction, I want to just say a few words about the context where we are today and when Swamiji was born. Then I'll hand it over to Jadi Maharaj to speak, and then after that, Professor Chatterjee will speak, and then we'll have some interactions, questions, and discussions about the life and mission of Swami Vivekananda. As you know that uh, we have technology today, including AI and machine learning. We have the best means to make our standard of living the best we can dream of, be it in agriculture, in medicine, in transportation, communications, food processing. Everywhere we are achieving a lot of many highs. But yet, burning questions haunt everything every day. That every thinking person, why is there so much social turmoil everywhere? Why is there so much unhappiness, stress, violence, injustice, hunger, destruction of nature, desperation, and poverty? Why is it so? If we had such great people, we have technology, why is it so? And uh, that's where Swamiji's mission and his message is relevant. Longfellow, poet Longfellow, in a psalm of life, he has written, "Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and leave behind us footprints on the sands of time." So if we follow this great people, we may have some answers to our current day challenges. And that's the relevance of Swamiji. We'll learn more from the esteemed speakers. One more minute I'll take to give you a context when Swamiji was born. So basically, around 1600s, or rather 1700s, uh, after a long period of invasions, foreign occupations, innumerable battles, millions dead, thousands of temples, and almost all centers of learning were destroyed by the 1700. Rajputs are there in few pockets like Mewar. Vijayanagar Empire ended in 1646. Aurangzeb died in 1707. Maratha Kingdom and Federal Confederation almost ended around 1800. Hindu Sikh Confederation Raja Ranjit Singh, that also ended around 1838. Ahom kings, their kingdom also ended around 1838. And at that time, as you can imagine, what was the condition of India? There is no one pan India identity, no one power ruling India. And it is a chaotic time when Raja Rammohn Roy imagined an Indian, united India. Rammohn was born in 1772, almost 70 years after Aurangzeb died. And then later on came Swami Vivekananda, who was born after Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa. Rammohan's pioneering work was to awaken the people of India, and then translating the Upanishads and other scriptures had reached the shores of Europe and also USA, even in Boston, where I am. The transcendental movement of Thoreau and Emerson basically created the ground for coming of a new great leader. 30 years after Rammohan's departure came Swami Vivekananda to America. And just to give another context, Sister Nivedita wrote in her notes on some wanderings, Vivekananda claimed himself to have taken up the task that the breadth and foresight of Rammohan Roy had mapped out. So, with that, I will hand it over to Swamiji, Jaydeep Maharaj, to please illuminate the audience here globally on Swami Vivekananda. Namaskar.
Namaskar, Kanchanda, for a very nice introduction. And also namaskar to my fellow panelist, Professor Debashish Chatterjee. And namaskar to you, Akshayji, for presentation of this program. And also namaskar to all the viewers and the members of the audience who are participating in this live talk. Well, Akshayji, we can come to the slides. The first slide is the topic, which is Vivekananda's Bharat, a phoenix that rose from the ashes. And you can see the image of the bird phoenix. It's a mythical bird which creates a fire when it grows old and dies in its own fire. After the fire dies out, then a heap of ashes remain, and from the ashes, that phoenix is reborn. So that is, I think, it becomes a very good allegory for the India that was, as Kanchanda was saying, when Vivekananda was traveling around in the country. And today's India, today's Bharat, there are problems, there are contradictions, but today's India is emerging. Today's India is confident. Today we have a Bharatiya identity. Today India is a force to reckon with. Today India is a force that people have to take seriously. There's also a nationalistic theme or a current flowing across the country. So from there, 150 years back to here, this big transition is like that phoenix bird. And I think Swami Vivekananda was a trigger point from where all this started to happen. Now we go to the next slide, Akshayji. The next slide, slide number 2, is Noreen has accepted the Ma. Now, this is a very interesting heading, I think. Well, Before going into that, let us try to understand the context. We have to, in order to understand these luminaries in this series, because we are talking about these Bengali luminaries, we have to understand Bengal, the eastern part of India, the traditions, the spiritual paramparas in a more profound way, let's say. So I'll just give you an event that happened. Rani Rashmani, as some of you know, is the one who built the Dakshineshwar temple. Here it is written you can see Rashmani and Bhavatarini. Bhavatarini is the name of the deity of that temple. Now, she was a very rich woman. She was a widow and she had inherited a huge business from her husband, and she was very powerful financially. But at the same time, she was Shudra, the lowest Varna, and she was illiterate. So there was a big resistance from the Brahmin community of Bengal against this temple, because how can a Shudra woman build a temple of the mother? Strangely, Rashmani, though, was very powerful and she was very courageous also. She had dared the British, especially when they tried to infringe on her business interests in many instances. But she was very respectful of the Brahmins. She really wanted the temple to be made. She really wanted the temple to become a sort of a center for many religious gatherings, center of worship, center of devotion of the mother. So her son-in-law Mathur Babu tried very hard to find a Brahmin who would do the Pran Pratishtha, the inauguration of the temple. It was very difficult. Nobody agreed. Even the Brahmins who understood her devotion and her honesty and her sincerity did not dare to come, because they were afraid that they would be outcast by the Brahmin community. Finally, somebody agreed, and he was Ram Kumar Chatterjee, the elder brother of Sri Ramakrishna. At that time, Sri Ramakrishna's name was Gadadhar. He was just a young boy. It was Ram Kumar who did the Pran Pratishtha, and after some time, it was Ram Kumar who became the head priest of Dakshineshwar. And he brought his brother along with him, Gadadhar. And the moment Rashmani saw Gadadhar, she realized that this boy is special. So whatever happens, he must stay in the temple. He must stay in this temple complex. Even if he is not very good in the scriptures, even if he's not a scholar, even if he doesn't do well, the puja, he doesn't do it very well, but he should remain there, because she realized that there was something special about this boy. And this is very important. The establishment of the mother, Bhavatarini, being done by another woman, another lady, Rashmani, who was Shudra, who was illiterate. This Dakshineshwar, within a few years, would see people like Vivekananda coming, Keshav Chandra Sen, Rakhal, who is going to be the first president of Ramakrishna Mission, Shivnath Shastri, Girish Chandra Ghosh, the great playwright, the great director and actor of Bengali stage, and so many other stalwarts, including Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay himself, including Michael Madhusudan Datta. All these stalwarts of Bengal at that time, cultural, spiritual, religious, from various fields, came to Dakshineshwar to meet Ramakrishna. In other words, this Dakshineshwar, founded by Rashmani, based on this image of Bhavatarini, a mother image, this Dakshineshwar became a cradle of what we call the Bengal Renaissance. That's my first point. Second point is, this Naren has accepted the Ma. Before going into that, just briefly, I will touch upon the formative years of Narendranath Datta. He was the family name of Vivekananda. He belonged to a, let's say, slightly upper middle class family. And his father, Vishwanath Datta, was an advocate who spent a lot of money. He earned a lot. He also spent a lot on relatives and friends. So when he died, then suddenly the family had to face abject poverty. And Narendranath was in dire straits because his mother really suffered, and all relatives went after them for property, as these things happen everywhere. So Nanda Datta, yeah, when he was very young, he was rebellious in many ways, a genius, very talented, academically never brilliant, but a voracious reader, a great exponent of music. His powers of concentration was incredible, and he was a seeker by nature. He could read volumes and volumes of books in one night. He had a photographic memory. My guru used to tell us that it was a thing that was given to him. That special talent, that special siddhi was given to him because he had very little time. Nana Datta would live only for 39 years. So, as Akshay had mentioned in the beginning, he had read up all the Western philosophy that was there on offer, all the history books, all the Indian philosophy, and the Vedas and Upanishads and the Gita and everything, all our sources, everything. He was a tremendous reader, and he could remember. We all read, but he could remember pages and pages. He could quote from the text. So this was Narendranath Datta having a nice time, slightly arrogant among his friends, because he was intelligent, because he was a good speaker. He loved to win arguments, and he sort of bullied his friends a bit, but a great heart. And he was a seeker. Inside, he was always questioning the customs of his times, the beliefs, the faith, everything. It was this seeking, this questioning that drew him to Ramakrishna. And he was not at all impressed by the way Ramakrishna used to talk to the mother, to this Bhavatarini. He used to say, "Oh, this is all schizophrenia. This is a kind of a mental disease. You have a problem." Uh, he used to be intrigued by the fact that Ramakrishna could go into these trances and that Ramakrishna had some beautiful ideas to share, but he was not very impressed by this communication that Thakur Ramakrishna supposedly had with Ma Bhavatarini. So this Nana Datta, when his father died, was under pressure because he had to look after the family. He had to look after his two brothers, his mother, his sisters. And there was Papa. They could not even arrange for a square meal every day. So Nandana Datta was going around looking for a job desperately. It was at this time that he came to Ramakrishna, and uncharacteristically, he told Ramakrishna, "Why don't you tell your mother to solve my problem? Your mother solves all the problems." Mother means Bhavatarini. The image in the temple, he had never visited Dakshineshwar temple. He had never gone into that temple. He had come to Dakshineshwar. He had been with Ramakrishna hours and hours, sometimes almost every day, but he had never stepped into the temple. He had never even seen the image. That look, I'm in this terrible situation. My mother is wearing torn sari, so I need a job. I need some financial security. Why don't you tell your mother? Your mother listens to you. And Ramakrishna says very simply, why didn't you tell her yourself? The Nandana Datta, in a great deal of hesitation. This is a very famous story, but the implications are very important. Nandana Datta goes to the temple, and then he sees that the mother is like a shining light. There's a tremendous strong vibration there because Ramakrishna had done serious sadhana in that temple. So he could not ask for money. He could not ask for financial security. He could not ask for a secured future. He said, "Give me love, give me devotion, give me knowledge, give me vivek, that is conscience." And he was mesmerized by the power of that place. So he came out and told Ramakrishna, "I could not ask her." So Ramakrishna said, "What's wrong with you? Go and try again." 3 times he tried, and 3 times he failed because he was so awed by the power of that deity. And then he said, "It's impossible." So Ramakrishna said, "Okay, you don't have to try anymore. You can go back home. Don't worry. Your basic needs will be taken care of." And after Narendra Datta left Dakshineshwar, this is the most important thing that I want to point out. Again, related to Rashmuni and the temple, Bhavatarini. After Narendra Datta left Dakshineshwar temple, Thakur started dancing. He called Ramlal and said, Naren has accepted the Ma. This, I think, Kanchanda, is very important to realize. The, the tradition of Shakti in Bengal, which was being discredited at that time, not only by the Europeans and the missionaries who were making fun of our images, making fun of our gods and goddesses, and trying to promote the Son of God, the human God, to our people, but also from the intellectuals of our own country, even in Bengal. They were trying to suggest that all the social evils are because of this worshipping of Mother Kali and etc., of Durga, Chamunda. All these gods and goddesses are giving way to Tantra and black magic and very evil customs, etc., etc. So the advent, or let's say the arrival of Sri Ramakrishna in Dakshineshwar was a new process, was the beginning of this Shakti thing that was again being, let's say, consecrated in that place, and through them in the psychology of the generations to come. This was very important. This key point is Naren has accepted the mother, meaning that this same Naren will be the voice of Bharatiya civilization, will be the voice of the Hindu dharma on the global stage. So that is very important in a time when his other scholars and intellectuals, very much drawn by the Western civilization, was trying to promote a monotheistic kind of a Hindu dharma. And to tell you very frankly, this is a problem even today. Even today, I can see that the mainstream Hindutva ideology has problems with this Shakti concept of not only Bengal. Bengal, Assam, Orissa is a huge region. Even the Northeast, if you go into the history, even Tibet, the connection between Tibet and Bengal is very well known. So from the very ancient times. So the concept of Shakti, at the same, when Naren has accepting the mother, in a way he's beginning to realize the energy of this feminine concept, this mother energy. Simultaneously, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee is writing his famous Ananda Math and the Vande Mataram, where the motherland is equated with the mother energy. This is coming from Bengal. Sri Aurobindo likened the map of India to a mother. In fact, he said the divine mother. Bharat Mata is the divine mother. So this concept of mother as not only being a kind of relationship with the mother, in the sense relationship with the soil, relationship with the rivers, with the water, with nature, but also relationship with the identity, relationship with the culture, relationship with the civilization, relationship with the past. This in a connection with the mother energy. This is very important. Also important is to realize that when it comes to mother energy, then there is more acceptance of differences. Then there is a more embracing of different points of views. When Ma Sarada says that Amjad is my son, even Sharat is my son, this is something that a mother energy can say. Usually, a male energy is all about trying to put everything in one basket, in the one basket of ism. If you think about classical Marxism, neo-Marxism, postmodern Marxism, and if you think about the Christianity, if you think about Islam, all these are very male-centric dharmas or opinions or dogmas. Our religion or our culture is basically, historically, mother-centric, energy-centric. And that mother-centric doesn't mean softness. It means a lot of power. It means a lot of courage. Look at Kali. Look at Ma Durga. Look at Chamunda. Look at other images. And this was happening. I mean, even Chaitanya Dev used to do a lot of Shakti sadhana. The Vaishnavas will not agree to that. Or if during Ramakrishna's time, think about Bamakhapa. Think about Ram Prasad Sen, Kamala Kanto, many others who were doing Shakti sadhana, proving that Shakti sadhana does not lead to social evils. It is not necessarily like that. It is not a natural consequence that if you are doing Shakti sadhana, it will lead to, black magic or black tantra or brahmachar and all these things. It doesn't mean that. Ramakrishna always mentioned the fact that in tantra there are various ways, and there is also the good way and the negative way, but all these ways can take you to God. The important thing is the Shakti, the concept of Shakti. And another important thing is this ability to accept diversity. That is what is, very, very basic to our culture. And something that, for example, as you know, the Prophet Muhammad had destroyed more than 300 plus temples, and some of them were temples of devis, of goddesses. We all know about the Christian theological concepts about whether Mary Magdalene was, in fact, one of the chief disciples of Jesus, and whether that Nari Shakti or the feminine energy was being destroyed, the narrative had been destroyed to make it a kind of a male centric energy. So that Naren has accepted the Ma, to me, is a very historical moment where Naren subconsciously goes through a transformation. He breaks out from this idea that how can a person talk with the mother? How can there be this duality, this devotion? This same Narendra, as Swami Vivekananda later expressed everywhere, that wherever I go, I see Vedanta only in duality. He said Islam is Vedanta in duality, Christianity is Vedanta in duality. Every religion, every major religion is actually Vedanta, has taken its root ideas, its root concepts from Vedanta. That is what Swamiji said. And another point that I would like to mention here, so the Shakti that Naren recognizes becomes the Shakti of Bharat. The Bharat becomes a Shakti, Bharat Mata. This is something that Subhash Chandra Bose stressed specifically, that my Kali, my Durga is my Bharat. They are synonymous. So that, I think, is something that Ramakrishna really wanted Narendranath to incorporate. Otherwise, Narendranath Datta's concept of Vedanta or his message of Vedanta would have been very typical, exactly what we are trying to do in our general secular kind of in exchanges. You see, as I was telling you, the mainstream Hindutva ideology cannot really understand this. What we are trying to do, forgive me if I sort of digress a bit, what we are trying to do is countering the Semitic narrative by imitating their style, by being aggressive and by become completely a male-centric an ideology. I have no problem at all with Ram, but Ram is alone there. There you don't find in those slogans the concept of Sita. You see, Shiv is alone there. You don't find, along with Shiv, the concept of Parvati. This is alien to the Bengal idea. And why it is important? Because Bengal had given the vision. Bengal had given the leadership, not only in the political level, but also in the spiritual level, in every level. Bengal had. And even Sister Nivedita realized how important this is. Because imagine, she being an Irish girl, years later, many years after Vivekananda passed away, is trying to explain to Rabindranath Tagore and all the other intellectuals of Kolkata the concept of Kali, how it is related to time, how it is related to space, how it is related to energy forces, and why is it important for the cultural regeneration of India. She, being a foreigner, is explaining to Bengali intellectuals, Bengali writers, the concept of Kali, because she realized how that Kali can be synonymous to the concept of Bharat, and how that can be a force to awaken that Bharat. Now, before we take a break from this segment, I would just like to mention another point. We come to the next slide, Akshayji, which is while we are on the subject of this interactions between Sri Ramakrishna and Narendranath Datta, there is another incident which everybody knows about Ramakrishna in one of his moods, in one of his trance like moods, had scoffed at the idea of daya. Daya, a word that the Vaishnavas use, something that Chaitanya Dev used to say, Jive Daya, that means kindness. You can say kindness to all, kindness to living beings. Even Buddha used to talk about Daya, but he scoffed at Daya. And he said, no, not Daya. It is Seva. Shiva Gyane Jiva Seva. That means service to all living beings as if they are all Shiva. Now, this was a transformative experience for Narendranath Datta. He took
So
a
Maharaj,
long, one
huh.
second, yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, so please conclude this session so we can move to the next one.
No, yes, I'm on it.
Okay.
I told you this is the last slide before I sign off.
Okay.
This is just one topic that I want to talk about. Jnana Datta was taking a walk around for about half an hour, and he said that this is something that I really heard for the first time. This is revolutionary. If possible, if God gives me the scope, I will implement this. And this is very important. And again, to understand that what the missionaries were trying to do. Missionaries were offering service, but their motive was to convert. So when Vivekananda he established his Ramakrishna mission, it was a counter to the missionaries. That okay, you do your service, you are trying to help out to the poor people. In fact, you have made them poor by looting them, by plundering them, and now you're offering these things in the name of God, and your motive is to convert them to Christianity. Now we are also trying to do seva. We are trying to educate the masses to take care of their health, to enlighten them, to awaken them, but totally selflessly. We are not trying to convert them. We are not asking them to come and take Diksha from Ramakrishna Mission. So this Karma Yoga became a counter to the missionary activities. Number one, at the same time, it became a joke which was not really heard of. Karma Yog, that is service to people on a regular basis, not like a one-day lunch to the Brahmins or a two-day lunch to the beggars, not like that. It was a continuous service through setting up of institutions, and totally selflessly became another substitute to meditation and devotion in a conventional sense as we knew it. So this was again another very important turning point which he sort of learned, or which he sort of absorbed from his interactions with Ramakrishna, and I wanted to insist on that. Yes, Kanchanda, you can now take over.
So to digest now for the audience and for me also, I just wanted to mention before we bring in Professor Chatterjee to speak that many people probably don't know, among the 51 Shakti Pitas or Sati Pitas in the subcontinent, 13 are in current West Bengal. Shakti Peeths, where different parts of Sati, fell, and whether it is Kalighat, whether it is the place where Raja Rammohun Roy was born. There's a Shaktipeeth. There's a Shaktipeeth in Tamluk. So when before Netaji Subhash Chandra left India, he worshipped there in Tamluk, that Shaktipeeth. So very well said, Maharaj, that Shakti has been the hallmark of not only just Bengal but entire eastern part of India. And to understand Swami Vivekananda is not that easy for anyone, as you probably know that towards the end of his life, Swamiji himself said he was murmuring, and someone heard that if there was another Vivekananda would understand what this Vivekananda did. So for anybody to really fathom what he was, just like a diamond with thousand facets, and we each look at one or the other facet, not the whole diamond, and yet each one has in his or her own life has a realization, who has studied, who has followed, who has worshipped Swamiji. And Professor Chatterjee is one of them. I know he has been not just researching but also living a life as Swamiji would have liked for an educator, as a teacher. So with that, I hand it over to Professor Chatterjee, Devasish Chatterjee, to tell us what he has experienced with this phenomenon called Swami Vivekananda. Please, welcome.
Well, thank you, Kanchanji. And Jadip Maharaj is taking you to roughly 50,000 feet. So I'm going to bring it down to 50 feet now, because we are talking about reconciling a very important challenge that I faced, that I'm taking back to year 2000. How do you raise cash and consciousness at the same time? How do you reconcile the material and the spiritual? It was Harvard Kennedy School. I was a Fulbright scholar, year 2000. The Bharat that Vivekananda envisioned was coming to terms with its own self-belief. So I borrowed some money from Kanchan, who was so generous in helping me print a brochure. We designed a simple brochure with a quote from Swamiji right at the top, and a modest fee that we thought would be adequate for us to raise some money to sustain the effort of doing these workshops in memory of Vivekananda. And the workshop was called Leading Consciously. And until the last day, the penultimate day, no one had actually signed up. The brochures were out there, and we were drawing a blank, zero. And so I went to bed in a meditative mode, and I was just wondering, what wrong did I do in embarrassing Kanchan and the rest of my community, sending out a brochure. My first book had been published by then in the United States, and I thought people would know me, but nobody really knew. And so we ended up with a sense of anxiety and disbelief that nobody would sign up for what promises to be a powerful. And then I had this vision of a man in radiant colors, and he comes and asks me a question in my half sleep, half dream state. Are you looking for me, or are you looking for participants? That would bring you the cash. Obviously, I was in the quest of the man who embodied Viveka at that point in time, and as luck would have it, I said, I am looking for you. And strangely, perhaps coincidentally, as many would say it, next morning I got a call from the HR head of AT&T, and they're saying we're going to send 5 people. Eventually, we ended doing the workshop with a substantial number of corporates joining. And so 20 years later, as director of IIM Kozhikode, I commissioned a full-length statue of Swamiji outside our International Executive Education Facility, commemorating and naming that building as Viveka, which is a 142 facility. And so I thought there was a method in this madness. And what was the method? The method was that the material and the spiritual, like Shiva and Shakti, Maharaj made a reference to Shakti, is only a divide of the mind. My lessons from that was that every effect has a cause behind it. The ultimate lessons of Vedanta came to me from this experience. Every effect has a cause behind it. And one cause can produce multiple effects, like a seed can produce branches, fruits, leaves, or tree. And the third element in that conclusion was that if you take away the cause, nothing remains. And so fundamentally, the relationship between cause and effect became very clear. And I wanted to make sure that I don't push you to a very serious consideration of something that many would think of as fluke, as an expression of deep thought of something as deep as Vedanta would be. But I have always taken it from a commonsensical perspective. Now, I still imagine a situation where No, it's a story that I made up for myself. Vivekananda has gotten admission to Harvard, and he is in a class which is being taught by a certain professor called Cotter. And the professor poses the following question to Vivekananda in the classroom, and there'll be a test after that. And he says, Mr. Vivekananda, if you were walking down the street in Boston and found a package, and within this package was a bag of wisdom, and then you found another bag with money in it, which one would you choose? And Vivekananda responded without batting an eyelid, the one with the money, of course. And Professor Cotter smiled sarcastically and said, I, in your place, would have taken the wisdom. And Vivekananda shrugged and responded, each one takes what one does not have. And Professor Cotter was very angry, and he wrote in Swami Vivekananda's exam paper, idiot, within quotes, and gave it back to him. Vivekananda took the exam sheet, sat down at his desk, trying very hard to remain calm. When he contemplated his next move, a few minutes later, Swamiji got up, went to the professor and told him in a very dignified and polite tone, Mr. Cotter, you signed the sheet, but you did not give me the grade. And so that was the conversation. And I said, look, I would like to look at Vivekananda not just as somebody who lived in a certain time period, but someone who realized that an economically impoverished nation cannot reclaim the value and vibrancy of the soft power of spiritual wealth until it came to terms with its economic reality. So in the Bharata Vivekananda, we deceived ourselves for a long time, thinking of religion as a cloak to hide our own weaknesses. The tantric modes of worship, exploitation of women, burning them at the stake. I mean, all the stuff that we thought could be the expression of a conscious or wise, we did all of that in the name of religion. And so the first thing that I think Swamiji did, with his trademark humor, he argued against superstitious beliefs that passed over spirituality. And he said, suppose, and these are his words, suppose a cow were philosophical and had religion, it would be a cow universe and a cow solution of the problem. And it would not be possible that it should see our own God. And so in the West, Vivekananda saw that the human animal was suffering from what would be described by another saint of India as the BMI complex, which is body, mind, and intellect complex, which was driven by a planet-sized ego and a disproportionate use of what might be called buddhi vritti, or the culture of the intellect. And Swami Vivekananda actually, I think it draws from what Maharaj said about the acceptance of Ma. So Vivekananda brought Hridaya Vritti as a antidote to buddhi vritti. So what did he do? He said that the preeminence of the emotional culture was useful in reconstructing India's national character. And he said it is culture of the heart, within quotes, it is the culture of the heart that we want. That's what he said. He realized that it is the culture of the heart and not just the intellect that will lessen the misery of the world. It is the heart which takes one to the highest plane, which intellect can never reach. It goes beyond intellect and reaches to what is called inspiration. That's what he said. And then he was critical. He dug holes in the superiority of the conception of the Western world as the reigning supreme of the intellect. He said, artificial wants have been created, and very poor man, when he has money or not, whether he has money or not, he has this desire to have those wants satisfied. And when he cannot, he struggles and dies in the struggle. This is the result. If all this vast amount of effort has been spent in making men purer, gentler, more forbearing, this would have 1,000-fold, or this will bring 1,000-fold more happiness than it has today. So he sought to fight the hyper-consumerism, the consumer mania of a cancerous society that he saw around him, with the radiance of unselfish service and the chemotherapy of unselfish love. He described them as karma and bhakti yoga. You know, this comes straight from my visit to a cancer hospital yesterday, when I was talking about chemotherapy of love and radiance of selfless service. So he said, finally, I'm going to end this segment with a little understanding of what was his conception of soft power. And Vivekananda's soft power was essentially the the soul power that Gandhi had later used as a tool as a political tool. While India had significant presence in the digital world right now, and that may not be our most sustainable pathway to soft power. The internet is a poor substitute for the internet. Humanism and soul power are the lifeblood of India's internet. Vivekananda expressed India's soul power in the spiritual and aesthetic planes. Following him, Gandhi, of course, took it in the political space. And if you look at the cultural endowment of Hridaya Vritti and Atmabal, which is soul power, can stand up to and measure up to the much touted civilization values that has driven the culture of the intellect for a long time without its redeeming effect. And so if you look at the unification, the unifying principle, Vedanta is such an extraordinary unifying way of looking at the world, darshan, that we would think of the challenges that the world faces, the global impact of this extraordinary ability to reconcile apparent polarities, dualities, comes from an evolved space which India had hidden for a long time. And I think one of the greatest contributions of Vivekananda was to Indianize India, first and foremost, before he globalized, attempted to globalize India. How do you really Indianize? How do you make Bharat out of India? How do you take the wisdom that was inherent in the teeming millions, hidden away, tucked away as useless, and how we resurrected it, and its impact is just beginning to show. I mean, we're just scratching the surface of what's possible going forward. I'll rest my case here because I don't want my voice to be a kind of monotonous. I have a few more things to share, and then after listening to Kanchan Maharajji, I'll take it up. Kanchan, over to you.
So that was quick. I thought you will be speaking for a little bit longer.
I have a few more, but I'll let Maharaj take a few more minutes, or you may. I have a few more things to say, but I can say that later.
All right. So I just wanted to mention one thing that many people may or may not believe in this, that the birth of Vivekananda has a mystical past that was described by Thakur Ramakrishna Paramahansa himself. I just wanted to take 2 minutes to actually describe how Ramakrishna thought Vivekananda was coming to this world. And it's very, very interesting. Many people probably don't know. Those who have read Kathamrita must be knowing this. So it will take a couple of minutes to just share with you. Thakur Ramakrishna is saying, one day I found that my mind was soaring high in samadhi along a luminous path. It soon transcended the stellar universe and entered the subtler region of ideas. As it ascended higher and higher, I found on both sides of the way ideal forms of gods and goddesses. The mind then reached the outer limits of the region, where a luminous barrier separated the sphere of relative existence from that of the absolute. Crossing that barrier, the mind entered the transcendental realm, where no corporeal being was visible. Even the gods dared not to peep into that sublime realm, but had to be content to keep their seats far below. The next moment, I found 7 venerable sages seated there in the samadhi, perhaps the Saptarishis. It occurred to me that these sages must have surpassed not only men, but even the gods in knowledge and holiness, in renunciation and love. Lost in admiration, I was reflecting on their greatness when I saw a portion of that undifferentiated luminous region condensed into the form of a divine child. The child came to one of the sages, tenderly clasped his neck with his lovely little arms, and addressing him in a sweet voice, attempting to drag his mind down from the state of samadhi. The magic touch roused the sage from his superconscious state, and he fixed his unmoving, half-open gaze upon that wonderful child. His beaming countenance showed that the child must have been the treasure of his heart. In great joy, the strange child said to him, "I am going down. You too must go with me." The sage remained mute, but his tender look expressed his assent. As he kept gazing on the child, he was again immersed in samadhi. Then later on, I was surprised to find that a fragment of the body, Sage's body and mind, was descending on earth in the form of an effulgent light. No sooner had I seen Naren later day, I recognized him to be the sage. When asked, Ramakrishna said that the divine child was himself. So this is a very mystical story. Many people may have hard time understanding what it means. Since Maharaj is here also, so I just thought that I should share this for those who are in the path of spiritual realize self-realization. They may appreciate that this duo was not ordinary souls. They were coming down from a higher and higher plane than a normal plane that we all live in. So with that, I will hand it over to Swamiji again. Maharaj, please, you continue from here.
Thank you, Kanchanda, and thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for your wonderful insights into soft power. And yes, how Vivekananda would have picked up the money because that is something that he did not have at that time. In fact, he said repeatedly in all his letters that he was writing from America the first time he went there for 4 years, that here I'm here just for the money. He just said, I need to build a mission. I need an ashram, a mission for women, and for all that, my countrymen doesn't have enough money, and I need it from here. They lack knowledge, they lack wisdom. I have it for them. He used to tell them, please don't send your missionaries there because we know what dharma is. You don't, and we don't have money, and you have taken it from us. So
And also, Maharaj, when Swamiji was asked, why are you
yes.
going to America? His straight answer was that after traveling throughout India barefoot, the abject poverty that I have seen, I cannot
Yes.
bear that anymore. I'm going to America to bring resources for them to rise, and I will give Vedanta to the West. That was
Yes.
actually recorded statement by Swamiji.
Yes, exactly, and that is where I am going to drive at.
Please.
Uh, if you come to the next slide, Akshay ji, slide number. This one is slide number 4. Sorry, slide number 4. Yes, the thing that he saw is beside the poverty, which you all know, terrible situation at that time, the servitude, the fact that the serving mentality, the servant mentality had become ingrained in the people. That is what really saddened him, that they were leading so inferior lives, oppressed lives, and they did not seem to have much complaint about that. That is what he was, that hurt him. And another very important thing about this is that Narendra Datta had no intention of changing the world. He had no intention of doing anything for his country while he was with Ramakrishna. So there are many instances where Thakur asks him, what do you want? What do you see yourself? How do you see yourself? And he used to say, I want to see myself like Shukdev, deep in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, in some hidden cave in the Himalayas. And Ramakrishna used to say that I'm ashamed of you. You should be like a big banyan tree that gives shadow and coolness to everybody who sits under it. That is how I had imagined you. So these conversations, these stiff taps used to go on between the two of them. Even on his deathbed, Ramakrishna had written down, because he could not speak because of his cancer, he had written down that Naren will be a preacher. And Narendra Datta said, I'm not interested. And Ramakrishna said, you will be forced to. In Bengali, it is tor ghar korbe. You'll be forced to. So Narendra Datta was not at all looking out for, doing something for the world, doing something for the society, the way modern day activists talk about, without any sadhana, without any moorings, without any ground under their feet. They want to do things for the society, you see. So it was only during the travels, as you have rightly said, Kanchanda, he traveled extensively barefoot. It was a great experience for him. He did not only see the degeneration of India, he did not only see the poverty and the sickness and the oppression and the servitude, but he also saw that the culture has survived. That is important. And he realized that it has survived because there was something in it. There was something that, whatever it is, dharma or tradition or ancient wisdom, something in the uh, genetics of our civilization that has helped it to survive. And then, deeply saddened, a man who was sort of impassioned, he had great passion, his total mood changed. He sat on that rock, that Vivekananda rock, the last point of the country, and he did meditation for 3 days, 3 nights. For the first time, he did not do meditation for himself. He really wanted to know what will happen to my country. And he saw around 100 years from that time to in the future, and he realized that there will be a lot of strife, there will be wars, India will become free, and finally the great India, the great Bharat will rise, but will rise from the ashes, will rise from the funeral pyre of destruction. The mother wants, sacrifices before that. We have to pay the price before that. And he realized that he had a role to play in this. So this parivrajan, this wandering alone, is a very important part of education. In ancient India, in the Gurukuls, after completing these 12 years with the Guru is to ask his disciple, go and visit the 51 Shakti Peeths around the subcontinent, you see, or go and visit the 14 Jyotirlingams, or go and visit all these temples. So these temples and Jyotirlingams and Shakti Peeths are actually like a map of a cultural, spiritual Bharat, which was a great part of an education. That education used to be complete with that kind of parivrajan. All the great reformers, you see, Sri Ramchandra himself traveled extensively. All the Pandavas of Mahabharata traveled extensively. That's why in Bengal we have a term, Pandav Varjita, a place where even the Pandavas haven't gone. They had gone to so many places. Buddha himself, Shankaracharya himself, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, Vivekananda, all the great reformers who had really been the pinnacle of our civilization had traveled alone, only to realize. You see, till that time, till he came to Ramakrishna, he had read a lot, theoretical knowledge. Then with Ramakrishna, he had done some sadhana, and it was not only sadhana, it was a relationship, as you were talking about, Kanchanda, a divine relationship between the two, something special that changed him, that brought out the lover in him. And then his travels, the practical side. And then his travels to the West, where he not only learned about the West, also from a Western point of view, he understood what was happening in India. Sometimes we don't realize Shamiji's deep, deep sense of history, his understanding, because not only because he had a lot of knowledge from the books, also he had a great power of observation. He had a great power to relate to people and understand their culture, their backgrounds, their history. If you read his own writings, not his speeches, his own writings, for example, Prachya and Paschatto, Paribraja Vivekananda, if you see these writings, you will see his total grasp of world history. And it was during that time he was talking about the European culture, their roots, the Spanish culture, the Italians, the Greeks, the Africans, the Americas, and also comparing them with Indian culture, and the fact that this Arjus coming from outside is all rubbish, bunkum. Show me an instance where Arjus had gone to a country and had destroyed their civilization, something that they have done. He was talking about these things, but we somehow in the mainstream education system, we have not really taken them seriously. Point number one. Point number two, another thing that I would like to mention from the sixth slide, Akshayji, we come to Bharat, Hindu, Dharma, and religion, where the second point is important, the Christian failure of Chicago. I think this is an important point to understand. The Christian failure of Chicago. We talk about Vivekananda's success, but we do not always remember that it was an effort to prove to the world that the Christian religion was the best, was the most superior, was the strongest. They thought that they had the proof because the three-fourths of the world had been occupied by the European civilization. So they thought that this is a victory of Jesus. This is a victory of Bible. It was because of the religion that they had managed to capture three-fourths of the world. They thought that conquest by brute force meant superiority. Mind you, the Roman Catholic Church did not participate in this religion because the Bishop of Canterbury had told specifically that when we have to sit down with other religions for the people to compare, that means there is something to compare us with. We are incomparable. We are the best, without any doubt. So that was the arrogance of the Christian world. 92% of the speakers who were there in Chicago were representing one kind or other of the Christian faith. For Presbyterian, Lutheran, this and that. So hardly anybody else. Even the Muslim representation was a Christian man who had converted into Islam. Incidentally, from India, there were other representatives. From Brahmo Samaj, there was Pratap Chandra Mujumdar. From Prarthana Samaj, there was somebody, but nobody from the mainstream Hindu society except Vivekananda. And he was there accidentally. Why? This is important. Why? The organizers had sent, in fact, some invitations to some of the leaders, some of the religious leaders of the Hindu faith. None of them knew English. They had to fill up a form. So none of them knew English. One monk, in fact, just wrote a slok in Sanskrit and sent it back. So the organizers did not understand anything. So they did not invite anybody because they realized that these people don't know English, so nobody would be able to understand what they're trying to say. This is, again, very important because people sometimes blame the Raja Ram Mohan Rai for having helped to introduce the English Education Act. But it was because that we started learning English, at least a section of our intellectuals, our scholars, our social workers, because they started learning English, they started grasping whatever it was that the Western civilization was. Its history, its literature, its theology, its philosophy. So they realized they could compare. They could now stand in their stage or on their stage, in the ring itself, and counter them. We were closed in the sense, not that we were illiterate. Some of us, some of the section of the population were quite literate. But the fact is that we were totally closed. We did not know anything about other societies, other cultures, especially the ones who were invading us, the ones who were trying to impose a narrative on us. So that, I think, is a very important thing to understand. If you look at Sri Aurobindo, if you look at Subhash Chandra Bose, you look at all this, even Chittaranjan Bose, he learned law, he learned their law and started defeating them, all these Sahib lawyers in court in Kolkata. So this is the Bengali brain, you see, that was very important, fundamental to create this nationalistic feelings, nationalistic sentiments. And his next point that I would like to mention from that slide is that Swamiji always reiterated that dharma is the main theme of Indian society. Whatever you do, if you want to change our education, do it through dharma. You want to change our politics, do it to dharma. Do it through dharma. You want to do anything, do it through dharma. If you try to do something as a separate from dharma, if you keep dharma as something secular, something very personal, like this is a personal faith, this is your personal sadhana. Let us not bring dharma into politics. Let us not bring dharma into education. This is the standard narrative today, the motto of secularism. He did not believe in this. The fact that there were social reforms, he supported social reforms. Not that he did not support them, but he felt that first there has to be an awakening from our dharmic standpoint. This is very important. Whatever he was trying to do, he was trying to introduce Vedanta into our daily lives, not just changing certain things from outside without realizing the history of those rituals, without realizing the history of those traditions. For example, in a place like India, if you want to introduce things like Akadoshi and the benefits of eating tulsi, these are all medical advisories. But if you do it in a medical way, people won't listen. If you do it in a dharmic way, people will. That is what he meant. That Bharat is a strongly dharmic society. So whatever you have to do to change, to reform, every moment you need to do that. But you have to do it through dharma, not as a separation, not as a something that you do cosmetically. That is very important. Another thing that he appreciated when he went to the West, he saw the liberated women there, the education, the culture, the cleanliness, the organization, and he was very impressed. Another important distinction that he made, which is my last point now for the moment, is that in Bharat, dharma is very, very dynamic. From ancient times till this date, we can constantly evolve, we can constantly change. We don't have these commandments which we have to follow forever. That's why all these Mahapurushas come. That's why all these great reformers come. That's why all these avatars come, to change interpretations, to bring in new messages in tune with the times. He himself being one great example. Same thing does not happen in the Semitic religions. Nothing changes as far as their religions are concerned, but their society is very dynamic. So Swami Vivekananda is to say that our dharma is very dynamic, but the society seems very static and stagnant. It refuses to change. It needs a lot of pushing and nudging before it can change. In the Christian world or the Semitic world, dharma is very static, very stagnant, but the society is constantly changing, constantly adapting, constantly evolving. It's always taking risks. That's why we need a merger of these two, that a dynamic dharma with a dynamic society based on dharma, where the East and the West ideas can merge. So this was my final point from this section of the presentation. Yes, Kanchanda.
Again, a lot of gems from your talk, Maharaj. I just wanted to mention, I think you were about to say it, that the Chicago World Parliament of Religions was really organized to prove the superiority of Christianity. There's one place Swamiji says, asked some disciple, do you know who this event was organized for? And he shows to himself, he says, this is for me. And as you said, by chance he could come
Yes,
to the parliament.
that is the divine. That is a divine design.
Exactly. So there has
Not
been a
the-
divine
not the
design.
American design.
Exactly. So he was popular. He was everywhere he went in America. In those days, we didn't have internet, no YouTube, no Zoom. Yet every newspaper in America, including in Boston, in Michigan, in San Francisco, big reports on his success story. And that was the impact of a spiritual person, not as just an intellectual discussion, so that he touched so many hearts. And it's unbelievable that in those days, I wanted to quote Dr. M.H. Logan in San Francisco. He was a very famous doctor, and he, after meeting Swamiji a couple of times, listening to him few times, he goes like this: his divine presence spread peace and tranquility wherever he went. None knew him but to love him. No being lived so low, be he a man or a beast, that Vivekananda would not salute. His was not only an appeal to the poor and lowly, but also to kings and princes and mighty rulers of the earth. Vivekananda shook the world of thought in all its higher lines. Great teachers bowed reverently at his feet. The humble followed reverently to kiss the hem of his garments. No other single human being was revered more during his life than was Vivekananda. This is by Dr. M.H. Logan during those times. So we can imagine the impact from this is just one person's observation, who was a famous doctor, surgeon, but there are thousands of such testimonials during his time visit of America. So with that, I would request Professor Chatterjee to add more of his thoughts to this discussion, which he promised. So please take your time and do present a few other thoughts that you have about Swamiji.
One of the revelations of Vivekananda, Swami Vivekananda, about himself, he called himself condensed India. That's an expression that sat with me for quite some time. I was wondering, how can one define oneself as condensed India? And many people don't know that, he had some handwritten notes that were part of his unfinished work. And here are some of the salient features of the notes that he wrote in like bullet points for a book that he had intended to write, but did not end up writing, passed away. So some of these bullet points, we just glean out what he was saying, is that the real problem, as well as the power source of India, is the assimilation of various constituencies. For Vivekananda, nationalism meant the regeneration of the spiritual values of a nation. The other thing that he said in the form of a bullet point, handwritten note, in other parts of the world, this fusion has been attempted, fusion of various constituencies, assimilation of multiple aspirations, attempted in the other parts of the world. He said, fusion has been attempted by force, that is the enforcement of the culture of one race over the rest. The result has been the production of a short-lived, vigorous national life and then dissolution. And Roman Empire and the Greek empires were cases in point. And then he wrote, monotheism, like absolute monarchy, is quick in executing orders, a great centralizing force, but it grows no further. And its worst feature is its cruelty and persecution. All nations coming within its influence perish very soon after a flaring of a few years. The solution, therefore, he wrote, the solution, therefore, to the great problem of integration is to harmonize and unify a nation without destroying the individuality of the various elements. And then his very prophetic words, I can see a future giant slowly maturing, the future of India, the youngest as well as the oldest, and the most glorious of nations of the earth. Here is the glory of the Advaita system, glorifying a principle, not a person. Please remember this word, glorifying a principle, not a person, yet allowing persons, both human and divine, to have their full play. Very interestingly, I remember Sue Burke's book on Vivekananda. She wrote a book called, I think, The Unopened Gift. And she's describing an American lady waiting to meet Swamiji, and Swamiji is pacing up and down a floor. While he goes up, he looks at a mirror and then goes back to the other side of the wall and then comes and looks at a mirror again at himself. This lady who's waiting for quite a bit is worried as to why is the Swami so narcissistic and self-obsessed that he should look at a mirror just to see himself and not find time for somebody waiting for him outside. And when Swamiji came out, he asked, I saw a strange thing. You were looking at the mirror. What were you seeing there? He said, I couldn't recognize my body. And I was wondering, who this Vivekananda? I had to see him in the mirror because I have lived in such a plane of reference and existence that for me to be confined within this physical body almost seems like a dream. So I was looking at this person in the mirror and asking, is this the Vivekananda that I'm seeing? So the question that I leave with you, Jayadip Maharaj talked about dharma and the ability to look at dharma as dynamic. And India has created two concepts of dharma. One is Sanatan Dharma, the other is Vishishta Dharma. Sanatan Dharma is universal principles, truth, authenticity. I'm Kozhikode, we adopted some of the principles of Vedanta in defining our value system as an institution. So this is Sanatan. Nobody can doubt that truth will triumph eventually, because truth is where reality is established, right? And so sustainability is a Sanatan Dharma. The universe of if you can't have Satyam and Nityam. Satyam is Sanatan, so is Nityam. Nityam has to be perennial. If it is not perennial, how can it be absolute? And so the third element of dharma is fulfillment or purnam. So Satyam, Nityam, Purnam. Purnam is that I want to complete myself. I want to be the whole. I want to reclaim my wholeness. And these three would constitute what you might call Sanatan Dharma. Within the Sanatan Dharma, there is Vishishta Dharma, which means the contextual Dharma. What is the Dharma of a Kshatriya? What is the Dharma of a king, the ruler, the Dharma of a Rishi? These are all reconciled within the perennial. So I think it is very rare that a human being can reconcile the two. And I personally feel that he was talking about the global impact of Indian thought in terms of reconciliation of these two dharmic components. On February 27, 1895, in a speech delivered at the hall of the Long Island Historical Society in New York, Vivekananda enumerated the wondrous contributions of India to global thought. He shared how India had exerted great influence on Christianity itself, tracing the teachings of Christ to Buddha, who he said foreshadowed Christ. So what holds true in the realm of religion also holds true or good in respect of science. Swamiji said that, in mathematics, algebra, geometry, astronomy, the triumph of Indian mind, what modern science owes itself largely to this mind. And he said India has given to the world fables of Aesop, and that was copied from an old Sanskrit book, Aesop's Fables. He also gave he said that the Arabian Nights and the story of Cinderella came from original Indian texts. In manufacture, he talked about how sugar, jewelry of all kinds, salt, was products of India. And he spoke eloquently about the exalted nature of Indian philosophy, music and drama. He spoke about, in fact, in short, he spoke about our polity, our society. He unfurled the flag of India, in short, as the new global soft power gifted with the bounty of ancestral heritage. While the civilizations of the 18th and the 19th centuries were synonymous with the Western world, globalization for a long time was synonymous with Westernization. Vivekananda actually debunked that, and he sharpened the edge of his attack against a colonial civilization that had reduced India to poverty and her sons and daughters to slavery. He articulated an endearing and perhaps a very enduring foundation for India's soft power. He said, and quite rightly so, this again goes back to the first theme that we were discussing. Our only fault is that we cannot fight to conquer, he said. And India's message that can that calm goodness, patience, and gentleness will ultimately triumph. This was the most spirited articulation of the ancient Indian expression, Satyameva Jayate. Finally, I want to talk about a bit on education, because that's the field I come from. Now, this cyclonic monk who had a life of 39 years, his brevity of life was matched only by the intensity of his message. Yet his legacy, as he saw himself, prophesied that his legacy, he saw it, would be slow and silent, and in his own words, as gentle as dew that falls in the morning, unseen and unheard, yet producing a most tremendous result. This, according to him, has been the work of his calm and persistent and patient, all-suffering spiritual life. We have never preached, Vivekananda said, our thoughts with fire and sword. If there is one word in the English language to represent the gift of India to the world, if there is one word in the English language to express the effect which the literature of India produced upon mankind, it is this word, and the word is fascination. What fascinates the world about India are our perennial values, as you rightly said, the dharma, authenticity, the perennial philosophy of Nityam, and the quest for Purnam, the ultimate fulfillment. And I think I will conclude with how do you reconcile a management professor's dilemma of combining wisdom and wealth creation? We send out our boys and girls to the world of corporations. And I was wondering, how does one reconcile this extraordinary 50,000 feet wisdom of the Vedanta with the mundane aspect of creation of wealth? Throughout centuries, wealth and wisdom were two soft power assets that attracted India to the world. I come from the city of Calicut, Kozhikode. With the advent of Vasco da Gama in this city in 1498, fortune seekers marveled at the opulence of India. The seekers of wealth went back with the realization that India's source of wealth was indeed her wisdom. In fact, Calicut was known as the city of honesty because the king that came and deposited some jars, claiming they were jars of pickle for holding on by the local Raja. When he came back after a few years, he found that the jars were intact. Nobody had bothered to open it because there were actually hidden in those jars some valuable jewelry and precious stones. And so they found that the honesty that Indians had, by and large, was the source of their wealth. It is in this incandescent mantra of Swami Vivekananda that we find a pathway to India's emergence as a super soft power in the 21st century. The long history of India has shown, this is Vivekananda's own words, the long history of India has shown that peaceful cultural expansion can be more dynamic and enduring than aggressive political or military ones. The history of the world demonstrates India's long history, that the world in the end belongs to the unworldly. The world in the end belongs to the unworldly. The material in the end belongs to the spiritual. That's all I had to say. Thank you. Over to you, Kanchan.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for bringing up another dimension of Swamiji's life and mission. One thing I just wanted to share along with that is that the world is talking about India becoming a Vishwa Guru, and in that same sense that India will become a Vishwa Guru in such and such time. My argument against that is that India has been a Vishwa Guru. India is a Vishwa Guru. India will remain a Vishwa Guru. Only the people of Bharat should realize that, and then only we don't have to wait for another century or another 25 years or 27 years. So well said, Professor Chatterjee, on that the power of spirituality, dharma, has to be the foundation of.
Kanchan, I missed a point. I'll take a minute if you allow.
Please go ahead.
I was trying to reconcile how wisdom and wealth could be, how Saraswati and Lakshmi would come together. I was just thinking both represent what you might call an expansion of consciousness. What is wealth? And I go back again to my favorite example of my conversation with Visa creator Dee Hock. He said money is human energy impulse that can be alphanumerically coded on a plastic card or on a currency note. And those impulses can travel the continents, provided there are two things behind the traveling of that impulse. One is trust, the other is value. See, this is dharma. So dharma is converting human energy impulse across the oceans and imprinting itself in currency notes and plastic cards and making it felt. And this is how wealth and wisdom come together. Just expand the consciousness a little bit, and then you know that both Saraswati and Lakshmi are simple manifestations of the same principle of expanded awareness or consciousness, whatever you call it. That's all.
Thank you. I think there were some questions relating to this. Someone asked about what dharma is, what is the difference between the Hinduism and dharma. So I think you already have answered this question. This was also my question to you. Later on, I was going to ask, so how Saraswati and Lakshmi can sit together in the same room, and which is very important. Before we move to, I know it's getting a little late now, but we have, I think, another 15 minutes we should have for completing some of the thoughts Maharaj also has. And also, I just wanted to mention to you, Swamiji had a encounter with, I'm using the word encounter, intention with our great freedom leader, Bal Gangadhar Tilak. By chance they met in a train, and Swamiji stayed with him. They had a lot of exchanges, and there are stories that Swamiji, and they said, okay, you do the political, I do the spiritual, such discussions. But when Swamiji took Mahasamadhi, Tilak was very, very sad, and this is what he had to say, and that will be a good segue to the next part. He said, thousands of years ago, another saint, Shankaracharya, who showed to the world the glory and greatness of Hinduism. At the fag end of 19th century, the second Shankaracharya is Vivekananda, who showed to the world the glory of Hinduism. His work has yet to be completed. We have lost our glory, our independence, everything. So that was in 1902 when Swamiji left this mortal body. And also, I cannot resist to mention about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's comment on Swamiji, that as you know, Netaji said that I'm his Bhava Shishya. Basically, if Netaji was alive, Swamiji was alive, Netaji say I would sit at his feet and do my seva to the nation. He said, reckless in his sacrifice, unceasing in his activity, boundless in his love, profound and versatile in his wisdom, exuberant in his emotions, merciless in his attacks by yet simple as a child. He was a rare personality in this world of ours. According to him, according to Netaji, Swamiji had consecrated his whole life to the moral and spiritual uplift of his nation as well as humanity. So I think Maharaj has some few more things to share, and then there are certain questions people ask. During the lifetime of any great person, there'll be some people who will not accept it. Some people will have different ideas. So I want to touch few of those towards the end of this session. I don't see too many questions, but I think that will be good. But Maharaj, you take 5 minutes to wrap up your thoughts. A few more things you want to say, about 5 minutes, and then we'll get to that segment, Maharaj.
No, I can only add to what Professor Chatterjee was saying about Lakshmi and Saraswati being together. So it is something that our Guruji, Swami Paramananda, had told us, that when there is Shiva, who is the father, in the middle, then Lakshmi and Saraswati can reside together without any problem. So which goes back to Professor Chatterjee's point of that only the otherworldly can fully be merged with the material. So it is from Shiva from whom we have got all our arts and crafts and medicine and ragas and dance and everything. So it is from Shiva from whom we have learned to generate wealth. But at the center of all these efforts, even when you are pursuing cultural aspirations, for example, you can be very egotistic. So maybe if I have money and then I feel proud and egotistic is one thing, but I'm a good singer and I'm a sadhak of Saraswati, let's say, but even that I can be also egotistic. So whenever I become egotistic, my progress suffers. I get stagnant. I get stuck. So when there is Shiva, when there is this element of tyag, which Swami Vivekananda always said, Hey Bharat bhuliyo na, tomar adursho sarbotyagi Shankar. Never forget that your greatest ideal is all renouncing Shiva, which doesn't mean that he's completely indifferent to material things. Not at all. Shiva, in fact, all the wisdom, knowledge, everything, cosmology to mathematics to Ayurveda, everything, Tantra, everything comes from Shiva. All the material things, let's say. So both Saraswati and Lakshmi can decide when there is this element of tyag or complete sacrifice or renunciation in the middle. That is, I just wanted to add to what Professor Chatterjee had said. And also, Kanchunda, in response to, I have nothing more to add except the fact that all the nationalists of Bengal, the radical nationalists, the extremist element in the Congress party, they were almost universally drawn to Vivekananda. It was so strong that when the British jailers realized that all these nationalists and revolutionaries who were being punished and who were going to be hanged in a few days were all smiling and reciting lines and lines from Vivekananda's literature. So they were asking each other, who is this Vivekananda? Why don't we arrest him? So these Bengali jailers told the British, he's dead. He has passed away many years back. So he had a very, very strong, impression. Bagajotin used to meet him secretly. Rashbihari Bose felt that he was the greatest inspiration in his life, not only Netaji. Hemchandra Ghosh said that I had touched his feet. I cannot think of touching anybody else's feet, not even Gandhi's feet. And this is something that Hemchandra Ghosh used to say. So when in Dhaka, because he did not talk about politics very directly, because he realized that there was this Ramakrishna mission, and the police were always suspicious about the mission of the young people with Gerua. They might be revolutionaries in hiding. So he had to be very careful about his words. So when Hemchandra asked him, "Did you support our movement?" he said, "Of course I do. Go for it. And may the first bullet that the British police fires hit this chest of mine." So he was a great influence on the revolutionaries. The Akras, all these places where they used to do exercises, they used to gather these young people, the young boys. They had in one pocket the writings of Vivekananda, another pocket the Bhagavad Gita, and is to swear by Bharat Mata and by Vivekananda. So his impact on the nationalist movement was very, very strong. And he also had a difference of opinion with Sister Nivedita. Sister Nivedita always insisted that India needs to become politically free first. Only then will you be able to realize your vision of a real conscious Bharat. Vivekananda said, let the multitude become conscious. Let them become enlightened. Freedom comes naturally. Most of the people are not even aware that they are in bondage. That is the problem with India. So I think this contradiction was always there between Vivekananda and Nivedita, but he realized the importance of the nationalist movement. He realized the importance of the political implications. So he had to be very careful. Remember that he was working always. The British were completely suspicious about his activities all the time.
Right.
So within that boundaries, he was doing a very great job. So
So
yeah, this is something that I just had to say. Add.
thank you, Maharaj. I just wanted to draw your attention that Swamiji was followed by all the great leaders, but
Mm.
during his lifetime, what happened? So, just to give an example, Raja Ramon Roy during his time, the entire society was against him. Now, this Swamiji, being a so-called Kayastho, he was not a born Brahmin. There was a lot of resistance that who this guy is, becoming a saint. Even in Bengal, in Madras, also he got resistance that this how can a non-Brahmin can be a saint. And then also during his last um, day days, there were a lot of resistance because he was giving Upovita the Janya to all the kids, not just Brahmin kids, and there were a lot of and teaching Sanskrit. So he had plenty of opposition during his lifetime. On his death, during the funeral of Swamiji, most of Calcutta was absent. So it was not easy. I mean, he suffered all his life. His family was suing him, and his mom was going through so much horrific time. They're like having so much property and all this. They were deprived of that. So as a human, Vivekananda, we find as a um, uh, blood and flesh Vivekananda that he went through a lot. And with the great lives like that, even Rabindranath was so much opposed during his lifetime. So there are many controversies that was created, just like Netaji was called Tojo's dog, by the communists. So many of these leftists also came up with some names for Swamiji. Instead of Vivekananda, they called him Bibika Ananda, and he was playing. He was swimming with girls in America. He had multiple wives. He was eating meat. How can he be a saint? He cannot be a saint. He was just even today, certain quarters of Bharat, especially from south, certain conservative movements are saying they don't even accept Ramakrishna Vivekananda as saints. So I wanted to bring your attention, both of you, if you please shed some light on these controversies, why it happened, and why it should continue like this. And that's part of the reason we are doing this luminary series, that the ignorant, the Kupa Munduks, will not understand the phenomenon of these lives, great lives from Ram Mohan all the way to Netaji. So please do say a few words, both of you, if you have some comments on these controversies.
Well, Kanchanda, you see, all the people who had criticized Vivekananda, you can hardly name them anymore. You have forgotten them. But Vivekananda is becoming so irrepressible. He's becoming so powerful every day. I can see it among the young generation. I can see Vivekananda in their eyes. This is something that he had predicted. In the future, I can see hundreds of Vivekananda, much stronger than me, coming and serving and doing for their country. So this is happening so strong that obviously there is resistance to that. Obviously, Vivekananda is such a binding force. He's such a great force with us. Even when we think about him, we feel the energy inside ourselves. This nobody else, no communist leader, no critic of Vivekananda, no critic of Ram Mohan can invoke in us. Can you name a
Yeah.
single person who crucified Jesus? All the people who nailed him. So you see, but today Vivekananda is everywhere. His literature, his thoughts, his ideals are everywhere. And this is bound to happen, Kanchanda, because he crossed the seas. And that is, the Hindu society, the Brahminical society was so closed, it was considered to be a sin to do that, crossing the seas. Then he, of course, yes, he used to be very free about his food, and he had explained these things very, very elaborately in many of his writings and speeches. Important to realize, Kanchanda, this idea that Hinduism means vegetarian as opposed to Christianity and Islam, which are supposedly non vegetarian, is something that Vivekananda opposed. Vivekananda said, being the most ancient civilization, it is the Hindus, Aryas, who have taught the world vegetarian and non vegetarian, both. You see, and then according to nature, according to body, according to occupation, according to the place where you are after migration, all these things are factors. And he has explained these things in detail, the for and against, the pros and cons of food. And he was not like this because I eat meat, so you also eat meat. He was not like that. He said, eat according to your nature, eat according to your dharma, eat according to your taste, eat according to your health. This very open minded about these things. So he was too much for our mainstream, Hindu society, the British bootlicking kind of a society at that time. They were the ones who were considered to be intellectuals. They were the ones who were taken seriously. So after Vivekananda passed away on the 5th of July, 6th of July, there was nothing in the newspapers. Only a short little news item, third or the fourth page of an English daily, which said, "The meat eating monk passes away."
Yeah,
Look at the slander. Look at the
exactly.
slander. So, this is bound to happen. But now his birthday evokes big headlines, even from these mainstream newspapers. So you see the currents change and these things happen. It happens every time.
Thank you. And before I go to Professor Chatterjee, I just wanted to quote Ramakrishna Paramahansa himself about meat eating habit of Vivekananda. So he says, Thakur Ramakrishna himself says, "Behold, here is Naren. See, oh, what power of insight he has. It is like the shoreless sea of radiant knowledge. The mother Mahamaya herself cannot approach him within 10 feet of him. She is barred by the very glory which she has imparted to him." Now he says, Naren has 18 extraordinary powers. Those of you know about yoga, tantra, Thakur is saying Naren has 18 extraordinary powers, one or two of which are as sufficient to make a man famous in the world. He is a burning, roaring, fire consuming all impurities to ashes. Even should Naren live on meat, it could not harm in the least the great power of spirituality within him. Those of you have read Kathamrita, you may find this, but this is what, the so-called meat-eating monk was to Thakur Ramakrishna himself, who is, we call Paramahansa Avatar. So I think those, who are in the path of spirituality, to have a lot of faith in Thakur Ramakrishna, and that put to rest about these confusions that, all right, if you eat meat, you are no more a Hindu or you're not in a monk. So I'll go back to Professor Chatterjee. I think I see some smile on his face. I'm sure.
Kanchan, just one little sentence.
Please.
If you meet you are no longer a Hindu, if you take that statement literally, that means you are completely wiping out, eliminating the great Shakta tradition of Bengal or the Eastern India or many parts of India. You're completely wiping it out from your narrative.
And
That is why. That
Yeah.
is why Ramakrishna's celebration of the fact that Narayan has accepted the mother is so significant and important.
Right. And also Shaiva tradition in Kashmir,
Yes.
they
Yeah,
also were not vegetarians. So, Professor Chatterjee, you're smiling.
Oh no, I'm smiling because I was once asked this question. I mean, I've seen you occasionally sharing non-vegetarian food. I said I only eat vegetarians. I eat those who eat vegetarian stuff, such as, I mean, I don't want to go there, but I want to share with you something that, all this conversation around whether meat eating or drinking this or doing that constitutes a part of the journey of human evolution. And now we have completely stuck in what you might describe as the BMI complex, body, mind, intellect complex.
Mhm.
There's a reality beyond body, mind, intellect, where body, mind, intellect is shrouded by this whole thing called the ego, which says, okay, I define my experiences of life based on these experiences of life. I think life outside my experience does not exist. So I have a limited version of what I know to be to be reality. And we are all frogs in the well. Kupamandukta is not confined to only a class of people. We all are. As long as we'll have a body-mind complex, we'll have this infirmity that says that I'm defined by the limits of my ego and my understanding of my body. Body perceives reality, mind feels, and intellect thinks. And so we look at our thoughts, our felts, feelings of the past, and our perceptions is equivalent to reality. Now, if you ask me, a person whose name is Srikumar Rao, he is based in New York, and he was trying to teach Vedanta in his classes in Colombia and other places. And he said, Devashish, I meet with resistances, people call me charlatan. Vivekananda, when I was quoting, he said, I mean, come on. And so how do I deal with this? I said, look, imagine the enormity of the resistance Vivekananda himself would have faced. He made it much easier for you today. At least people have heard about Vedanta and all that. Imagine when we were sitting against those rocks coming to, ridicule in Chicago, people throwing stones at him. Imagine what he must have gone through. And I like to see all the abuses, all the opposition as a purifying process. Because if you have to come clean as pure gold, you have to go through fire. And if you don't go through fire, Christ's crucifixion, Buddha's renunciation, Vivekananda's extraordinary hardships in life, unbelievable. I was reading Shankar's work on Ajana Vivekananda, and this is something that I would ask every Bengali to read to see what makes a Vivekananda is this extraordinary cleansing process through that kind of resistance. Once you go there, then you realize that it has happened to all great people. It happened to Gandhi, it happened to Tagore. Vivekananda, of course, it had to happen to him, because for every incumbent to truth, there will be an insurgence of the establishment. Every person who does something new, there'll be 10 others who will pull him down. And so this is the reality of life. And if one has to transcend that, one has to be a Vivekananda. Ordinary people can't do it. That's why he is what he is.
Thank you. That's great. There is one question, though a little bit less relevant, but I want to take that one question. The question is, in a letter written to a Mr. Settler, he says that we need to go to Africa. Swamiji is saying we need to go to Africa. So I also read something similar, that African continent is crying for a spiritual vacuum that they have, and they want something to happen. So, definitely that was in Swamiji's mind. Apart from what he did to the West, he brought Vedanta, and as many of his contemporaries says, that even Smithsonian came up with a special edition during the 200th anniversary of America's independence. quoted him as one of the top 20 people who came to America ever. Most important people, most influential people. There they said Swami Vivekananda left an indelible mark on the spiritual life of America. And similarly, others also said. So I think he also was preaching a practical Vedanta to the world. And I think Africa was in his roadmap. Someday, some Indian, some Hindu monk will be there to help people in Africa to also reach their self spiritual realization. So on that, if Swamiji or Devashish has any comment on that.
Just two things, Kanchanda. This is exactly the sentiment that is reflected in one of Netaji's letters while he was in prison, where he was only 21 years old at that time. He had wrote to his elder brother, Sharad Bose, that both the Europeans, the Christians, and the Muslims are trying to create ground in Africa, are trying to convert that nation. And I think it is very important that Hindus should try to expand their influence in Africa. It's very important because African culture, the forest culture, the tribal culture, is closer to the Hindu culture, and they can identify more easily. That is number one. First point that completely tallies with what Swamiji had said. Number two is due to the endangered labor and the slave trade and everything, all this big class of African Americans and European Africans and all these things, the Africans have actually lost their identity. They have actually lost their culture. Their memory is gone. You see, we at least have our memories with us, our civilizational memory. They don't have anything. So they think that Christianity is their root, or people who have taken up Islam, they think Muslim is their root. Nothing before that. So that is a big crisis in their life. You see, to identify who they actually are. And that is why Africa is important. Something that I would like to add again. Third point, my Guruji used to say, there will come a time when the world stage will become like Kali. The black will start to dance on the white. He said.
Very interesting.
My own limited take on this will be my frequent visits to South Africa to teach, and Indian thought and leadership. I think the wilderness skills of Africa is very close to what would bring them to the realization of what spiritual life is all about. Because spiritual life is about wilderness. It is not about staying stuck. Neti, neti, chariveti is spiritual life. And one expression from South Africa has stuck with me. And the expression is Ubuntu, which says the essence of Vedanta is here. I am because you are. That's what Ubuntu means. I am because you are is the equivalent of a namaste, which says, with the power of my hands, with the love in my heart, and with all my intellectual might, I acknowledge that amness that resides in you and me in equal measure. That is namaste from the Indian tradition. That's Ubuntu from Africa. I think we are already one in that essence. But in terms of transmission of our extraordinary intellectual and knowledge systems to Africa would require a lot more giving, caring, and nurturing the African spirit with our institutions. First, IIT has made a foray into Africa. IIT set up. First, IIT set up. IIMs will go there soon. And I think we'll be there sooner than later.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That, I think, brings to the end of this wonderful session. I just wanted to conclude with a couple of things before we end. First of all, if one had to summarize Swamiji's mission in life, he himself said very clearly in a letter to Sister Nivedita on June 7th, 1896. At that time, still, Swamiji is calling him Dear Miss Bull. My ideal indeed can be put into a few words, and that is to preach unto mankind their divinity, and how to make it manifest in every moment of life, the divinity and divine presence. This world is in chain of superstition. I pity the oppressed, whether man or woman, but I pity more the oppressors. So that was the mission statement, basically, of his life, spoken to none other than Sister Nivedita. Uh, but so he was with this in this world for almost 39 years. Out of that, probably less than 10 years was his active life. And he, towards the end, on 9th July 1897 in Almora, he spoke. I had to talk a lot about myself because I owed that to you. I feel my task is done. Uh, at most 3 or 4 years more of life is left, he's telling in 1897. I have lost all wish to my salvation. I never wanted earthly enjoyments. I must see my machine is strong working order, and then knowing sure that I have put in the liver for the good of humanity in India at least, which no power can drive back. I will sleep without caring what will be next, and may I be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries so that I may worship the only God that exists, the only God I believe in, the sum total of all souls, and above all, my God, the wicked, my God, the miserable, my God, the poor of all races, of all species, is the special object of my worship. I shall work incessantly until I die, and even after death, I shall work good for the world. It may be that I shall find in it good to get outside of my body, to cast it off like a discussed garment, disused garment, but I shall not cease to work. I shall inspire men everywhere until the world shall know that it is one with God. So with that, I know we went way over the dedicated time, but the discussions were so interesting. Hopefully our audience loved it. And just wanted to thank Sangam Talks again once more for hosting these events. And we have many other topics coming up. And next Sunday, same time, we'll have the topic on Bengal's revolution, and Professor Gautam Sen from London School of Economics, and Sri Sanjeev Chanel, economist from Delhi. They'll be speaking about the revolutionary movements of Bengal. So with that, I'll hand it over to Akshayji. Thank you again. Thanks to all the people listening to this great program. Akshayji, namaskar.
Thank you, sir. Kanchan sir, before we end, I know we have already extended time, but before we end, I would like to take 2-3 more minutes to read out an section from an article that I wrote last year about the day, that eventful day of Parliament of Religion, where Swamiji spoke. So, you and our both respected speakers have already highlighted how Swamiji's speech at Parliament of Religion in Chicago introduced him on the world stage. So, this event made Swamiji a household name all around the world on 11 September 1893. I would like to take this opportunity to read out a small section of that article for our viewers, so
Please.
that we can leave our viewers with a bit more idea about that historic day. So it goes like this: a fairly unknown monk without the necessary paperwork to speak in the Parliament of Religions on just faith comes to a new country and a new city. Faith that he will get a chance to speak, that, and then by many twists of fate, he finally gets a chance to speak at the event. On the day of the event, a biographer of Vivekananda states, several times he had been called upon to speak, but he said, no, not now, until the chairman was puzzled and wondered if he would speak at all. At length, in the late afternoon, when the chairman insisted, the Swami arose. When he spoke, everyone listened. From his opening remarks till he left the stage, the audience was ecstatic. His biographer notes, his face glowed like fire, his eyes surveyed in a sweep the huge assembly before him. The whole audience grew intent. A pin could have been heard to fall. Bowing to Devi Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, he addressed his audience as sisters and brothers of America. And with that, before he had uttered another word, the whole parliament was caught up by a great wave of enthusiasm. Hundreds rose to their feet with shouts and applause. The parliament had gone mad. Everyone was cheering, cheering, cheering. The Swami was bewildered. For full 2 minutes, he attempted to speak, but the wild enthusiasm of the audience prevented it. So this was a small section which has been noted by his own biographers in his complete biography. So this highlights how important that day was, and how the audience was completely mesmerized by his speech that day, and how it introduced him on the world stage. Thank you so much again, Debashish sir. Thank you so much, Joydeep Maharaj, for joining us. Thank you so much, Kanchan sir, for joining us today on Sangam Talks. Thank you, Bangla Abhar, as well. And so, with that, I'll end this event. It has been a 2 hour long session. Thank you so much again, everyone. It has been a pleasure for us and for our viewers to listen to all of you.
Thank you. Namaskar.